This is breaking news. Within the last several hours, Israel and the United States have launched a massive joint military operation against Iran. Strikes are hitting targets across Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, and multiple other Iranian cities. Iran has responded by launching dozens of ballistic missiles at Israel and U.S. military bases across the Middle East. Explosions have been reported in Israel, Jordan, Syria, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. This is not a limited strike. This is not a warning shot. This appears to be the beginning of a full-scale war between the United States, Israel, and Iran. And it is happening right now, as this video is being recorded. This is everything we know so far about Operation Epic Fury, Iran's massive retaliation, and what this means for the Middle East and the world. At approximately early morning local time on Saturday, February 28, 2026, Israeli and American forces began launching strikes against targets inside Iran. The operation has been codenamed Roaring Lion by Israel and Operation Epic Fury by the United States. Unlike previous limited strikes, these attacks began in broad daylight, and according to sources, the U.S. military is planning for several days of sustained attacks. This is not a one-time retaliation. This is the opening phase of what appears to be a sustained military campaign. The targets include locations in Tehran, Iran's capital city, as well as Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, and Kermanshah. Multiple missiles struck University Street and the Jamhuri area in Tehran, near the headquarters of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which is the elite military force that controls much of Iran's regional operations and proxy forces. One strike hit dangerously close to the offices of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei himself, the highest authority in Iran. And tragically, a strike hit an elementary girls' school in Minna, killing at least 40 people. Whether this was intentional targeting or a missile going off course is not yet clear, but the civilian casualties are already mounting. Shortly after the strikes began, President Donald Trump addressed the nation and the world. His statement was stark and unambiguous. He announced that the objective of this operation is to destroy Iran's missile and military capabilities, prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, and ultimately, to topple the Iranian regime. Those are extraordinary war aims. This is not about deterrence or sending a message. This is about regime change. Trump went further, directly addressing members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, calling on them to lay down their arms in exchange for immunity. He warned that refusal would mean, in his words, certain death. And perhaps most remarkably, he addressed the Iranian people directly, saying, "When we are finished, take over your government." The United States is openly calling for the overthrow of the Iranian government. Within hours, Iran's response was massive and unprecedented. Iran launched dozens of ballistic missiles across the Middle East, targeting not just Israel but U.S. military bases in Jordan, Syria, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Explosions rocked northern Israel as missile defense systems attempted to intercept the incoming barrage. Blasts occurred across numerous Gulf Arab states. The U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, one of America's most important naval command centers in the region, was targeted. The scale of Iran's retaliation demonstrates that they are not backing down. They are fighting back with everything they have. Iran's proxy forces are also activating. The Houthis in Yemen, who are backed and armed by Iran, have announced they will resume attacks in the Red Sea, threatening one of the world's most critical shipping lanes. If the Houthis begin attacking commercial vessels again, global shipping costs will spike, oil prices will soar, and the economic impact will be felt worldwide. This conflict is not contained to Iran and Israel. It is rapidly becoming a regional war that could have global consequences. Inside Iran, the situation is chaotic. Communications have been disrupted in several areas of Tehran. Cell phone networks are down, either from damage to infrastructure or from government attempts to control information flow. Social media reports, which should be treated with caution but are among the only sources of real-time information, show explosions, fires, and panicked civilians. Iran has declared a state of emergency. Israel has done the same, with air raid sirens blaring across the country and citizens ordered to remain in protected areas or bomb shelters. So how did we get here? This didn't come out of nowhere. The roots of this conflict go back decades, but the immediate escalation began in June 2025 with what became known as the 12-Day War. That conflict saw intense exchanges of fire between Israel and Iran, with both sides launching strikes. It ended with a ceasefire, but it was a fragile one. Both sides knew the war wasn't over, it was just paused. Since then, tensions have only increased. Iran continued developing its missile program and moving closer to nuclear weapons capability. Israel continued conducting covert operations inside Iran and assassinating key Iranian nuclear scientists and military commanders. The shadow war never stopped. Then, starting in December 2025, something changed inside Iran. Massive anti-government protests erupted across the country. These were not small demonstrations. These were huge, sustained protests with hundreds of thousands of Iranians taking to the streets demanding change, demanding freedom, demanding an end to the Islamic Republic. The Iranian regime responded with brutal force. Estimates vary, but somewhere between 7,000 and 32,000 protesters have been killed by Iranian security forces in the past few months. That is an astonishing, horrific number. The Iranian government has been killing its own people in massive numbers to maintain control. And that brutal crackdown has only fueled more anger, more protests, more instability. The United States and Israel have been watching this internal crisis in Iran very carefully. A destabilized Iran, a government that is killing thousands of its own citizens and losing legitimacy, presents an opportunity. If external military pressure is combined with internal unrest, maybe, just maybe, the regime could collapse. That appears to be the strategic calculation behind Operation Epic Fury. This is not just a military operation. This is an attempt at regime change, using military force from the outside and hoping that the Iranian people will finish the job from the inside. But regime change operations are extremely risky and unpredictable. The United States learned this the hard way in Iraq and Afghanistan. Overthrowing a government is one thing. What comes next is far more complicated. Even if the current Iranian government falls, there is no guarantee that what replaces it will be stable, democratic, or friendly to the United States and Israel. Iran is a country of 85 million people with deep internal divisions, powerful competing factions, and a revolutionary history. Regime collapse could lead to democracy, or it could lead to civil war, further radicalization, or regional chaos. The international response is already developing. Russia and China, both of which have close relationships with Iran, have condemned the attacks. Russia has been providing military technology to Iran, and China relies on Iranian oil. Both countries have significant interests in Iran's survival. If this war escalates further, there is a real risk of great power involvement, either directly or through increased support to Iran. That would transform this from a regional conflict into something much more dangerous. European nations are calling for restraint and de-escalation, but they have limited influence at this point. The strikes have already happened. The war has already begun. Calls for diplomacy, while important, are unlikely to stop the momentum of military operations that are now underway. Oil prices are expected to spike significantly when markets open. Some analysts are predicting increases of $5 per barrel or more immediately, with potential for much higher prices if the conflict continues or if Iran successfully disrupts oil shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 20% of the world's oil passes. The human cost is already mounting. At least 40 children were killed in the school strike in Minim. Iranian military facilities are being destroyed, which means Iranian soldiers are dying. Israeli cities are under missile attack, which means Israeli civilians are in danger. American service members stationed at bases across the Middle East are being targeted. And this is just the first day. If this operation continues for several days as planned, the casualties will rise dramatically. One of the most important questions is what Iran will do next. They have already launched a massive ballistic missile response. But Iran has other options. They control proxy forces across the region, Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has an enormous arsenal of rockets aimed at Israel, militias in Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen. If Iran orders a full activation of all these proxies, Israel could face attacks on multiple fronts simultaneously. Hezbollah alone could launch thousands of rockets at Israeli cities, overwhelming missile defenses and causing mass casualties. That scenario would force Israel into a ground war in Lebanon, which would be extremely costly. Iran could also attempt to close the Strait of Hormuz using mines, anti-ship missiles, or swarms of small attack boats. If the strait is closed, global oil supplies are immediately threatened, prices would skyrocket, and the world economy would face serious disruption. The United States Navy would have to conduct operations to reopen the strait, which would mean direct naval combat with Iranian forces. That is an escalation that could widen the war significantly. There is also the nuclear question. Iran has been enriching uranium for years and is believed to be close to having enough weapons-grade material for a nuclear bomb, though they may not yet have a deliverable weapon. If the Iranian regime believes it is about to be overthrown, would they rush to complete a nuclear weapon as a last-ditch guarantee of survival? Or would Israeli and American forces target and destroy Iran's nuclear facilities before that becomes possible? Those facilities are hardened, buried deep underground, and difficult to destroy. A successful strike on Iran's nuclear program would require extremely powerful bombs, possibly including bunker busters, and would need to hit multiple sites simultaneously. The Israeli military is one of the most capable in the world, with extensive experience in precision strikes and intelligence operations. The United States military has overwhelming firepower, advanced technology, and global reach. Combined, they have significant advantages over Iran. But Iran is not a small country, and it is not defenseless. Iran has spent decades preparing for this scenario. They have hardened military facilities, dispersed their assets, and built redundancy into their command and control systems. They have large stockpiles of ballistic missiles. They have regional proxy forces that can open new fronts. And they have a population of 85 million people, many of whom, even if they oppose the government, may rally around the flag when their country is under attack. Wars rarely go according to plan. The United States expected quick victories in Iraq and Afghanistan, and both turned into long, costly conflicts. Israel expected quick resolution in Lebanon in 2006, and it turned into a difficult, inconclusive war. Operation Epic Fury may achieve its military objectives quickly, or it may bog down into a prolonged conflict with unpredictable consequences. What happens in the next hours and days will determine the trajectory of this war. Right now, as this script is being written, explosions are happening in Iran. Missiles are being fired at Israel and U.S. bases. Air defenses are intercepting some but not all incoming threats. Casualties are mounting. Governments are declaring emergencies. Military forces are mobilizing. And the world is watching, waiting to see if this escalates further or if there will be any off-ramp to de-escalation. The Iranian regime has survived external pressure before. They survived the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, which lasted 8 years and killed hundreds of thousands. They survived decades of sanctions. They survived internal protests in 2009 and 2019. But this time is different. This time they are facing sustained military attack from the most powerful military in the world combined with an internal uprising that has already seen thousands killed. The question is whether this combination of external and internal pressure is enough to break the regime, or whether Iran will find a way to survive once again. For Israel, this operation represents an enormous gamble. If it succeeds in destroying Iran's military capabilities and contributing to regime collapse, Israel's greatest strategic threat is eliminated. But if it fails, if Iran survives and retaliates effectively, Israel could face years of rocket attacks, terrorism, and regional instability. And if civilian casualties mount, international opinion could turn sharply against Israel, creating diplomatic isolation even from traditional allies. For the United States, this represents a major shift in Middle East policy. For years, American administrations tried to avoid direct military confrontation with Iran, preferring sanctions, covert operations, and support for regional allies. President Trump has now crossed that line decisively. The United States is at war with Iran. The consequences of that decision will play out over months and years. American forces will be at risk across the region. And if you found this breaking coverage valuable, the economic costs give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone who wants to understand what's really happening in Mexico right now are significant. Thanks for watching. This is a developing situation that is changing hour by hour. Information is fragmentary, and some reports may be inaccurate or exaggerated. But what is clear is that we are witnessing a major war beginning in the Middle East, one that involves the United States, Israel, and Iran directly, with potential to draw in other regional and global powers. The coming hours and days will be critical.